Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Semla. That's right, I'm going to share my first official attempt at Swedish Fat Tuesday buns, which I've gotten many requests for, most from one particular Swedish fan, who will be immortalized in the rhyme later. But anyway, he was kind enough to share his recipe with me, and for my first attempt, I was very happy with how these cardamom-scented, almond paste-filled, sweet buns came out. And to get started, the first thing we'll do is make a very rich, buttery, sort of sweet dough. And that begins with some warm milk, over which we will sprinkle 1 packet of active dry yeast, plus some, but not all of our all-purpose flour. And then what we'll do is get in there with our wooden spoon, and we will mix this until it's smooth, and we form sort of a thick batter, or maybe a very, very runny dough. And then once that's set, we will simply let that rest for about 20 minutes, during which time we can pull the rest of our ingredients together. And once our 20-minute wait is up, we can start adding those in. And first up, we have some powdered sugar, followed by 1 large beaten egg. We are also going to need a generous amount of cubed up room temperature, hopefully fairly soft butter. And then we'll top that with the rest of our flour before seasoning this with a nice big pinch of salt. And then the signature ingredient, a couple spoons of ground cardamom, which to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of, but it really is perfect in these buns. And that's it. Once everything's together, we'll take our dough hook, and we will knead this in our mixer, or of course by hand. But either way, we'll go ahead and knead this until a very soft, but very smooth and elastic dough forms, which is probably going to take about 5 or 6 minutes in kneading. Okay, maybe a little longer if, like me, you didn't use butter that was soft enough. And as usual, don't be afraid to stop a few times and scrape the sides down. But anyway, eventually my butter got mixed in, and I eventually ended up with something that looks like this, which you're going to get a much better look at when I pull it off the mixer and place it on the table. So we'll go ahead and transfer that onto a lightly floured surface. And using just enough flour as we need, we will form that into a ball of dough. And then I have some very surprising news. Unlike virtually every other bun recipe, we are not going to let this rise and double in size before we divide this into 12 portions. I know I was as shocked as anyone, but what we'll do is simply take this unrisen dough and divide it into 12 equal portions, which I'm going to do like a professional on a scale. All right, just weigh the entire thing and divide those number of grams by 12. And then you'll know how many grams each portion should be, which for me was 78. And yes, believe it or not, I nailed that one on the first try. And then all we have to do with each portion is simply roll that into a ball shape, making sure we end up with a nice smooth skin over the top. And we'll place that down on a parchment-lined baking sheet and give it a light press. And then do the exact same thing with the other 11. And that's it. Once that's been portioned and panned, we can finally let our dough rise for about 2 hours or until doubled. But before we cover this with a towel, let's go ahead and dust it with flour, which of course will prevent our towel from sticking. And that's it. Like I said, we'll let that sit for about 2 hours or until our buns have doubled in size. And if everything goes according to plan, they should look something like this. And then before these get baked, while we're waiting for our oven to heat up, we will go ahead and brush these all over with an egg wash, which is simply a whole egg beaten with a teaspoon of water. And please do me a favor and do the whole thing all the way to the bottom. All right, if you just brush the tops, you're going to have what we call in the business tan lines. And you'll see kind of a sharp line between the paler bottom where you didn't get any egg. And it just won't look as good. Okay, as an old chef I used to know would say, the only buns that look good with tan lines are at the beach. And yes, he said that a long time ago. Right, these days we don't say that kind of stuff. But back then it was fine. Anyway, once those have been thoughtfully and thoroughly egg washed, they are ready to transfer into the center of a 425-degree oven for about 12 minutes, or until lightly golden brown, and hopefully looking like this. Oh yeah, those are some beautiful buns. And then once baked, we'll transfer those onto a rack to cool completely before we cut them and pipe in our sweet almond filling, which is what we should probably make while we're waiting for those to cool. And this filling is going to start with 2 7-ounce packages of what's called almond paste, which is kind of like marzipan, but it's not as smooth or sweet. And then to that we will add some powdered sugar, some cardamom, and then last but not least, a nice big splash of milk. And then what I did was take a spoon and started breaking this up so I could mix it smooth, which was an absolutely horrible decision. Right, what you really want to do, and what I must insist you do, is use your blender or food processor, and just throw all this in there and blend it smooth, which is going to take you about 30 seconds. But I didn't do that, since I don't like to clean food processors or blenders, which really is not that hard to do, and most people would argue is a lot easier than spending literally 10 minutes trying to mix and mash this together. Although I eventually did get it to the point where I could switch to a whisk, and I was able to mix it pretty smooth. And that's it, we can transfer that into a piping bag or a plastic bag, and we can place that in the fridge until we're ready to use it. And then once our buns are cool, to prep them for the filling, we need to take some scissors or a small serrated knife, and we'll cut a triangle in the top, and then pull that section out. And once that piece is removed, we can take a fork or our fingers, and we can remove a little bit of that crumb from the inside to, of course, make room for our delicious almond filling. Oh, and if you do an image search, you'll see most people just simply slice the top off and just end up with like a round lid. But I have it on a very reliable source that a real semla has to have a triangular top. But anyway, you decide. And yes, I did bite and eat the part of the bun that was underneath that triangle. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself, but it was delicious. And that's it. Once the bun's been prepped as shown, we can go ahead and pipe in our almond filling. And I should mention there are many, many different versions of that filling, with varying amounts of cardamom sugar and milk. So please feel free to adjust those to your taste. I mean, you are, after all, the Andreas Ekstrom of making sure your guests say yum. And yes, that is the name of the food wisher that requested these, who is a fairly famous Swedish reporter and journalist and writer, and apparently semla baker. And a sincere thanks to him for sharing this recipe. And then speaking of yum, to finish these off, they are topped with a generous amount of whipped cream, which you can just spoon, but since I have to take some contractually obligated pictures, I used a piping bag with a star tip. And once that's done, we'll place our triangle of crust on top. And we will finish up with a light but gorgeous dusting of powdered sugar. And our semla is ready to enjoy. So I picked that up and went ahead and bit in. And for the first official attempt, I was extremely happy with how this came out. Except apparently I didn't put enough whipped cream on, because from what I hear, if you do, when you take that first bite, you're supposed to end up with whipped cream on the tip of your nose, which didn't happen to me, although for what it's worth, I did get a little bit in my mustache. But I'm not sure if that counts. And the combination of that unsweetened whipped cream and that sweet, thick almond filling, enjoyed in that subtly sweet, very buttery, cardamom-scented bun, really was fantastic. And I can totally see why people enjoy these on Fat Tuesday, before we all start our Lenten fast. And by we, I mean other people. All right, I'm not a big faster. If I'm late eating lunch, I start to panic. But if you are going to fast for 40 days, may I suggest eating a couple of these before you do? But anyway, whether you're going to enjoy these on Fat Tuesday, or as my Swedish friends in Louisiana call it, Mardi Gras, or you just feel like whipping up a batch of these on some random weeknight, no matter what the occasion, I really did enjoy these very much, which is why I really do hope you give these a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.